Hey everyone, Livy here, back with another video. Also, welcome back to my channel if you're not new, but hello if you are. This is Crescent Dreams Tarot, and today, today we're gonna do a VR that I swear I've been meaning to do this VR for a while, but I don't know what it was. I was having a hard time picking decks at first. So yeah, you're seeing this a little bit delayed, but this tag is Wanderlust Decks, and it is a VR to Rhiannon Rambles. There are 13 different prompts related to traveling. So I love, you guys already know, you've seen it. I've been on a few travels since I started this channel, but this is about traveling and the whole act of traveling and the different types of travelers, and then relating it to tarot decks. And it's just been so fun. So I don't know why I don't know why I was waiting. Maybe I was just like waiting to figure out which decks actually made sense to me where. But anyways, let's move on from that. 13 prompts. First one is the Backpacker. A deck that's adventurous, practical, and versatile. And for me, for me, the deck I picked as the Backpacker is this one. Now, I should start by saying I do have a combination of tarot and oracle, so it's not just like all tarot or not all oracle. So yeah, anyways, side note, because this is an oracle, the Backpacker for me is, oh my goodness, it's taking forever to get out. Here we go. The Roots and Wings Oracle deck. And it should be, okay, some of this should go a little bit without saying as to why this is the Backpacker. But this deck, if you don't know it, is very nature-y, adventurous. It can be also very spiritual too, I will say. But it's got literally, and I'm going to show you. But this is the little pamphlet it comes with. So it's versatile and practical. It has all the card meanings, but it's not like this big, overtly dramatic thing. I also have the mini and perfect edition, just to point that out there because my edges and stuff. This is what the backs look like. And this deck is very adventurous. It's very practical. It's about being in nature, but at the same time, it's also just versatile because it's a smaller size. It's easier, to be honest, to take around with me. Like, I literally took this deck traveling with me. And also just because like the keywords on the bottom make it very easy to interpret. So that's also practical, right? Like from a practical standpoint, this oracle works amazingly. See, like such good, and look, even like the camping imagery, like canoe, waterfalls. This is a total backpacker. You could fit this into any size bag, because as you saw, it was like only this little bundle here, but you get so much out of it at the same time. And for that reason, I love this. This oracle works for so many things. And also because I think someone else noted this too in a video, but the white, like, you guys know, I don't usually care for white space, but because this deck does have it, and I don't mind it in this one because of the beautiful watercolors, by the way, because it has it, it's just so, it is also versatile in that way. Like you can pair it with a lot of decks, and the way that the watercolor is, it's not like obtrusive and stuff. So it's so good. It's so adventurous. It has that nature vibe, like going out, backpacking around the world, in my opinion, vibe. I'm going to fast forward through bugs because I know some people don't like bugs. And, you know, this was literally the first and easiest one out of all these to pick because, look, here we go. I mean, is this not, is this not a backpacker, you know? Like, beautiful on the nose, but also just such a good little oracle. And if you don't have this one, I definitely recommend picking it up. It is by Kat Riles, I guess. I got this through her Instagram, but website is there too. And if you get them perfect edition like I did, this deck was just so stinking cheap. So for its price too, it was also being practical, and I love it. So the backpacker, a great one, to be honest, very good. Okay, prompt number 2 is the Cruiser, a deck that's relaxing, luxurious, and enjoyable. And to be honest, I'll be honest here, I kind of struggled with this one because I have never, ever been on a cruise before. So for me, it was kind of one of those moments where I'm like, oh shit, what do you actually do on a cruise, you know? Have never been on one. I've known people who've been on them. So I've heard stories and things. I just never been one. By the way, it's early morning for me, so I am going to take a quick slurp, but anyways. The reason why, though, I picked, as you guys can see, is the Lilford Tarot. This is the Gold Edition by Marion Costentin. The reason why I picked this one is because, well, okay, I had a lot of decks that I guess you could have called luxurious, but for me, every time you have like gold finishings like this, like the gold foil, and then like literally just like gold everywhere, that gives me those luxurious vibes. The cardstock is also luxurious. I don't know what it is about it. It's like, it's really nice and thin and bendy, so people who like riffle shuffling could easily riffle shuffle this. See, there's the gold again. And then, so that's the luxurious notes. But the reason why, I don't know why I feel like overhanding it, because it's just so smooth. It's so nice. Anyways, the reason why I picked this as the Cruiser is because this deck does have an interesting combination to me of like fire and like either, I don't know, it like skirts the line between being swords of a deck for me or cups of a deck for me. I don't know how to explain that, but it definitely like first and foremost is a fiery deck. But for me as a fire element, mainly, or like that being like the biggest thing in my chart, I guess, I don't know what it is. I'm obsessed with this deck. It is relaxing for me. It is enjoyable. These little like non-human, I don't know what, like demonoid kind of like figures are so fun. And like, look at the sassy, and just like the Knight of Wands is so perfect. Look at this little, it's like, I'm pretty sure this is like some kind of dragon or something, but I am obsessed. Like, you know what I mean? It's so fun and just relaxing for me. For me personally too, I'm able to interpret this deck. Like I understand what it's getting at. And due to the Gold Edition actually having the numbers on the bottom, like that was the biggest, I guess, complaint for people who had the first. It is easier to figure out in that way. Like, look at how, isn't that homey and enjoyable? I'm sorry. Oops. There you go. Oh, it focused. There we go. This deck is just so fun, and ever since I got it, I've kind of just been, I've always had like, I always get these urges like, I just need to touch it. I just need to like shuffle it because it's just so nice. And by the way, what also makes a deck enjoyable for me personally is, can I actually hold it properly? And the answer to this question is yes, I can. I have small hands. You guys can't tell because the way my setup is, I have a camera that's closer to me. But this deck is so small that I can literally grip it like this. I can grip it like this, okay? That's what makes it also enjoyable, is that, and even when it's all together, easily grippable. And it doesn't hurt. So perfection in that way. And that's what also makes a deck just nice. It's just a cruise worthy. I don't know. I'm really digging this. So if you haven't got a chance to pick up the Gold Edition, I'm telling you, especially if you have smaller hands like me, this might be the one for you. But yeah, that is my Cruiser. And I'm sticking by it. I love it. Okay, next up. Number 3 on this beautiful tag is the Road Tripper. a deck that's spontaneous, fun, and full of surprises. And for that one, the first thing that came to mind for me was the Practical Magic Tarot. And I'm going to explain that, and actually, give me 1 second. My air conditioning went on and it kind of makes loud noise and I don't want it on right now. So give me 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. Anyways, back to the tag. The reason why the Practical Magic Tarot by Chingay Labrador, the reason why this deck for me is a road tripper is that this deck, okay, I'm not someone who like always actively personifies all my decks or anything like that. But this deck, ever since I've gotten it, gives me very teen spirit energy. It's very youthful and fun and full of surprises in the sense that like some of the way that these images were collaged are just so different than I've literally seen anybody do with some of these decks. I mean, and also it's just fun and enjoyable because it has like a cool setup to its little guidebook. It's just a little pamphlet, but it's great for, you know, beginners. This is a very beginner-friendly deck. And it's also full of surprises because, like, some of these keywords are just really great. And the whole deck doesn't have keywords. This is mainly for the minor arcana, by the way. Just saying that. But this deck is very spontaneous and fun. It's got bright colors. The collaging is just done in this way for me that's not, how do I phrase this? Sometimes I like, I love the idea of collage decks, but I don't always like all collage decks because some of them feel very, what's the word I'm looking for? Busy? Yeah, busy. Like the way that they're collaged together doesn't leave a lot of room for, I don't know, little bits of creativity. Sometimes they're just like all smashed together and they can feel kind of random, but these don't feel random. But at the same time, it is very spontaneous and fun still and full of surprises. Like, it's like for this student, you just got this like interesting image. Beautiful dreamer, you know, just do the work. Like all these like fun and cool poses. And then you get some like this was just a tower. It's like, okay. Full surprises though too in the depth of it and like the meaning you can get. Like even this Eight of Wands is still one of the most fascinating Eight of Wands I've come across, you know. It's just so fun. I don't know. I'm so glad I have this deck in my life. Maybe not everybody would feel that way, but I am obsessed. It's so good. And yeah, because of that, this gives me, hey, there you go. Road tripping vibes, you know. Gives you like something fun that you would take along. And it would be like, but that's the thing with road trips too. What people don't understand is that even if they're fun and spontaneous and full of surprises, road trips also can be very profound. And this deck, I feel like, can really give you those moments. I don't know if I would call it necessarily teen angst, but you get those like moments where you're having fun and things are going well. And then suddenly someone brings up a really interesting point and you're just like, whoa. And you kind of have this moment where you stop and you think about it. And it's like the overall theme you realize of your journey. I don't know how else to explain that, but this deck incorporates so much of that for me. So Practical Magic Tarot is my road tripper. Okay, next up, the next one, number 4 for this tag is the Explorer, a deck that's curious, daring, and open-minded. And for me, I'm going to pick the Zerner Farber Tarot. I know, interesting of a choice, huh? And this bag, or this little pouch, by the way, is one of Kelly Bear's creations. So good. Look at it. So cute. Anyways, this deck, oh man. As soon as I got this deck, I knew that this deck was something else. It was different. And that's kind of what, you know, when you're trying to create a collection of decks, you kind of want things that are going to be sometimes open and curious and different. It had this edition of the Zerner Farber has these backs, and this it is matte, but it's like matte gold finish. And this is actually a smaller size too, so it's like really easy for me to use. But anyways, why is this my Explorer? This deck is an interesting oddity in itself. I mean, look at it. This deck has been around for ages. So if you guys don't know, this was originally once called like the Enchanted Tarot, the Zerner Tarot, or Zerner Farber, a different edition of Zerner Farber, a few different other names to it. And used to have like different cardstock, be by different companies. This one's now Schiffer Publishing or Schiffer Red Feather. I don't remember which they go by these days. But anyways, the reason why this deck is different, I don't know, for me, is that originally all these images, if you didn't know, were originally quilted by Farber, the Zerner and the Farber, or Farber and the Zerner, sorry. So this is a curiosity in itself, that this was made by everything getting quilted together. It's daring and different because this deck, if you don't know, kind of it combines things, but also does its own thing. So you'll see things in here that are very similar to like Tarot de Marseille. Some of the minors have almost like a Thoth kind of style, even though I don't read Thoth. Like, it's what I've seen. And then at the same time, it could also be very RWS. So see, this is more like Thoth, I guess, leaning for the 3. Even the 6 of Swords, like the pillars and stuff. But anyways, so this deck is very open-minded in the sense that it does not want to get tied down. It also does its own thing with the suits, right? So instead of cups, it has hearts. It just wants to do its own thing. It's an explorer. It doesn't want to be tied down to any one thing, right? It's like, I have my own system, and you're either going to like it or you're not. But it's just it's such a fascinating deck to me, and I feel like this is a great explorer because it just wants to try out so many different things, and it doesn't want to be told it is one thing or not, and that's really what explorers do. They want to experience everything, and I feel like this deck is always trying to experience everything. So for that reason, this is my Explorer. Okay, next up, number 5 in this tag is a Tourist, a deck that's popular, accessible, and well-known. Okay, I could have gone with a few decks for this one, because I do have some mass market ones also that are also very popular. I could have even just straight up been like, oh, here's the Rider-Waite-Smith, because I do have the Modern Hue Tarot. I could have gone in that direction. But I decided that this was, for me, my best tourist. This is the Morgan Greer Tarot. This deck has been around a while. It's newer for me, but this deck is very well known, right? It's one of the old school decks. My version is the 1 in a tin by US Games. It's very accessible, okay, because this deck, well, most tarot stores are going to have this deck, especially in this tin option, more than the other version of it. So in this way, it's also accessible because it is in a tin. It's easy to carry around and take with you. It is very well known. It's been around a while. It's one of those up there with the Hanson Roberts, the Connolly Tarot, original RWS, Thoth, it's up there in that Centennial Edition. And so for that reason, it's also very popular. A lot of people usually have this deck. For me, it took me a while, but a lot of people tend to get it outright. And it's a good small size. That's also why I wanted the 1 in a tin. But this deck, this deck is everything in some ways. Okay, listen. I originally did not want to get this deck because it was very popular. So that also tells you something. I was just like, I don't know if I'm digging these like porn stashes. I think as Julie from Peekaboo Rosa said, like porn stashes and the weird so the women in this deck, when they do appear and they're nude, they tend to be like very baby bear. They're just not, I don't know, it's just very uncomfortable. It's like, what am I supposed to think about this? But this deck has been everywhere. I'm pretty sure it even goes around the world. I saw people who had this deck in Canada. I saw like within the US. Very popular. One of those old classics. These are the backs if you've never seen them. So for me, out of all my decks, because there were a couple of others that I considered for the tourist, I think this is the biggest tourist. It has been everywhere. It shoves its way in. It's like, hey, look at me. I'm like very similar to the RWS. Look at me. I'm trying my best. You know, it's easy to get a hold of in some ways. Maybe not everywhere, I guess. Because this is a US, like it's published through US Games, I suppose you would need to be able to access it in that way. But at the same time, I'm pretty sure I've seen this deck around like other places I've been, so it can be accessible. Yeah. And for that matter, I do think it makes its way around the tarot community. And so for that reason, this is my tourist. Okay. Number 6 for this tag is the local, a deck that's authentic, familiar, and close to home. Now, interestingly enough, I actually had 2 options I could have gone with for this, okay? I almost thought about talking about this deck, only because this is a deck that's actually close to home for me. The creator of the Lioness Oracle Tarot does not live very far from where I do. So in that way, that would have been authentic, familiar, close to home. But the thing about the Lioness Oracle and why I didn't want to use it for this tag is because even though technically, yes, the creator is, you know, close to home for me, the authenticity and familiarity feeling when I go through the deck is not the same. So for this, I picked Coastal Curiosities by Lennox Reese. This is the 2nd edition, and I'm sorry to say this, I recently, really recently actually, found out this deck is now out of print, so I am so sorry that I'm showing it, but I think this is authentic and familiar for me because of its subject matter. So the creator lives in Portland, I believe. I think it's Portland or somewhere in Oregon. So not too far from California. And also just the fact that this is a very, what's it called? This deck is all about coastal curiosities, specifically of the Pacific Northwest and, you know, West Coast in general vibes. So in that way, because I live in California, this deck is close and authentic and familiar to me, especially the ephemera and like, or not ephemera, what do you call that? The things that you can find within this deck is very familiar to me. Like even the littlest things, like these grapevines. I live in more northern California, not like the most north you can go, but the Bay Area. And even then, this is pretty much the vibe you get if you go within, I don't know, 30 minutes in any direction from where I specifically live. It looks more like this. And for that reason, this is so authentic and familiar that every time I like go through this deck, I can't help but think, wow, this is, I don't know, this feels like a part of me, you know? It's just very familiar and feels like from this, I don't know how to explain it. It's like from this time would have been in my own childhood or youth. It just has this very, I don't know why so many of these are like upside down for some reason. Anyways, it just feels like this other time and place, like maybe what it felt like to live in California in, how do I explain this? What it felt like to live in California in the late 90s, early 2000s and going about and traveling and doing things, this was a vibe. I don't know I don't know how else to explain like that bottled up feeling of like, because my family used to do a lot of camping. We go to the beach a lot, and it's not like the hot white sand all the time beaches that you expect maybe down in SoCal, right? Like closer to LA or San Diego. Our beaches look more like this. They're colder water. You can swim, but it's just colder in general. So instead you get more foresty, coastal mixed in vibes. And this is what this deck gives for me. So for that reason, the Coastal Curiosities is my local. This feels the most close and best to me. So yeah. Next up, number 7 in this tag is the Jet Setter, a deck that's glamorous, sophisticated, and worldly. And for some reason, when I was thinking of this one, the first thing that came to mind for me was the Tildwick Tarot. I happen to have the 10th anniversary edition, so it looks like this, has a box that goes like this. And there's even a little guidebook in here, right there. But it is, the only thing I'll say about this guidebook is like, I appreciate it, but the writing is so microscopically tiny that I literally like have to hold it up super close like that just to read what it's saying. So there's that. But anyways, not important. Not as important as the deck itself. Okay, first off, glamorous. Once again, it's got that gilded edging or gold, gold edging. This deck is sophisticated in the way that it looks and feels, and like the English garden kind of aesthetic that it goes for. But this deck also feels worldly to me because there's something about, let me backtrack. Every image in this card is supposed to be tied to like a big like manor, or, like someone's like rich, stately place. And so each of these images is like a part of this giant house and grounds. But the reason why this deck feels worldly to me is that whoever owns this giant stately place gives me the vibes of a worldly traveler, right? Like even here, you can see it with the globe, the map on the wall. This is somebody who has money. They are somebody who's been around the block. And in that way, they've come back and put all this like stuff into their house. Like things from all over the world, like little puppets and such. Or like, even just getting like perfumes from different places, or like bringing back plants that maybe are not native to the region, or like look at things that belong kind of in in a museum and not necessarily in somebody's house. Whoever in theory owns the house, the mansion, the manor, whatever you want to phrase it, that the Tildwick Tarot resides in, they are someone who's been around, and more than that, they've created this giant house, but they're like barely in it themselves. There's someone who is going out in the world or jet setting off to the next place, so that when they do come home to this big grand house, they have more things that they're just adding to their house. Like, hello, like look at even the masquerade. This would have been the carnival, kind of like Italian masquerade mask, right? They've gone around and they've done things. And so in that way, this definitely feels like a jet setter. Like they would have the money to go off and even own a jet, to be honest. So for that reason, the Tildwick for me is my jet setter. Yeah. Okay, number 8 for the tag is the Pilgrim, a deck that's spiritual, meaningful, and transformative. And here's the thing with that. It can be, for some, even just saying that could be very, what am I thinking? Subjective. It's subjective because some people view some things as more spiritual than others. Some people would use this moment to tie it to specific deity work. If you're doing, if you use tarot in that way to do deity work more. So you would have to think like, what is really spiritual, meaningful, or transformative to me with tarot? And I would say, because I'm not someone who, I am starting to work with one deity, but it's not like, doesn't take a whole aspect of my life, to be honest. I still see spirituality as like very me-centric or just transformative and interesting to me. And the deck that does that for me has been the Guided Hand Tarot. When I got this deck, I do have a walkthrough of this deck, but when I got this deck, there was something about it that felt very, it felt immediately transformative. It was a deck that I knew was going to mean so much to me, and I couldn't understand why I waited so long to pick it up. Its cardstock is also just something so buttery and beautiful about it. And these are the backs. This is by Irene Mudd, by the way. She has a website, but you can also get this. I got this off of her Etsy. This deck is, to me, this deck is very spiritual. It is another collage deck, but this deck at the same time, even though it's collage, there's something about it that feels, it almost feels very historical. It feels like it gets to this like spiritual energy that's tied to the universe. Like it understands things so simply but so perfectly that I don't know what I would do without this deck in my collection. And that also is, by the way, is how you know a deck is transformative. If it's one of those that you just know immediately, I cannot live without this deck. It is so profound in the messages I can teach you. Like, I mean, I've gone over this. I've talked about these two cards up the wazoo, but even these alone has this cosmic energy that's so, I don't know. I get very like, I don't know. It just fills me up with something inside, like this energy I don't know how to place. But this deck feels like one that would go on a journey on its own and try to discover everything the universe has to offer it. And then it came back and it gave you snapshots, and it's just in this deck. And for that reason, I don't know. It is very nomadic to me. It feels like it could go anywhere and take on more things with it. And look at, it's just so, it's so interesting and different, the things that it likes to pick up on in that way, you know? So for me, oh, sorry, not nomad. This is like pilgrim, sorry. Spiritual, meaningful, transformative. This does feel like a pilgrim. And they are off on a journey to figure out just these key moments in life. And I don't know. I would want to go along on this ride because this deck is just everything. Everything. And if you don't have it, I do recommend it because it is fabulous. Okay. If the Guided Hand Tarot before was my pilgrim, this for me feels very nomadic. So let me roll that back. So number 9 is a nomad, a deck that's free-spirited, independent, and adaptable. And I think this for me is my nomad. One reason why it's adaptable is, as you can see, I have the pocket edition. So I could basically either shove this deck, it's pretty small, kind of. It's more chunky, but it's still small enough where I could pretty much shove it in a bag and go. Or I could just have it out. And because the cards in the pocket edition are much smaller size, you could do bigger spreads or you could do smaller spreads and it wouldn't matter because it is a great size. But the reason why I think this is my nomad is because it's also very, there's something about, oh, by the way, it has like these cool holographic silver edges in the pocket. I don't remember what the edging is supposed to be on the regular edition. But anyways, not important. The reason why this deck is a nomad for me is that there's something about it that is very free-spirited. It is almost tied to that pilgrim energy. It can feel very spiritual and otherworldly, but it kind of just does its own thing. It's just living life. There's like people literally floating in the clouds. You can get a lot from it, but it's also very like, look at the strength card in this one. They just look like very fun and like lively. They're having a good time. And it doesn't need me to hold its hand, and it doesn't expect me to need my hand held, because the images that are in it are very, they're very easy to interpret. But what's interesting is I wouldn't call it a straight up RWS clone either, because it's not, the imagery in it is not straight up RWS, right? It does do its own thing. It's very independent. It gives you the same vibes without giving you the same images. And it's got that nomad, like, I want to go around and do whatever I want kind of vibe to it, you know, and it does. And in that way, it's, I don't know, this is such a good deck to have. For the longest time, I didn't know how I felt about this deck. Like, I kind of held off getting this one too, but when I saw they had a pocket edition, I picked up the pocket edition. And to be honest, I have not regretted it, because yeah, it is a good size. And it also has an extra card in here that is just beautiful. So I don't know, this deck does its own thing, and yet it's still like easy to use. And it's got this like very free energy though. And I just really like it. And I've talked about it before. This deck for some reason reminds me of one of my best friends. I don't know why, because I don't know if she would actually like this deck, but for some reason this reminds me of her. So yeah, that was my Nomad. This is the Star Seeker Tarot by, oh, there he goes, Nikki Ferrata. By the way, no one needed to know this. Like, eventually I'll talk about this deck. I did back, she recently came out with an oracle for this. Did it through Kickstarter. I did back that. Unfortunately, I could not get that one in a pocket size. So I'm really interested to see how that oracle is going to go with this. But I did do that. That was just a side note. Anyways, we're going to move on to the next thing. Okay. Number 10 on this tag is the Culture Vulture. A deck that's diverse, educational, and enriching. And maybe others would argue this, but I think this is a great one for this tag. I mean, for this prompt. This is Tarot of the Divine. This is a Yoshitani deck. And as it says on the bottom, it's inspired by deities, folklore, and fairy tales from around the world. So there you go. And it's literally not lying. It is literally from many different cultures around the world, which is also what I appreciate the most about this deck. It is diverse. The images on it are diverse. The bodies it's showing are diverse. It is different fairy tales, but they are not just the same ones we've seen over and over again. Like, yes, okay, this is Sleeping Beauty, cool. But this is like an Eastern Europe folktale. This is literally Greek mythology. This is Scheherazade. Oh, God, did I pronounce that right? From 1001 Nights, okay. 1001 Nights. Another more European. Some of these are more European, but this is literally Aladdin. I forget what culture this is from. This is Hawaiian, you know. This is an African, like, related to African myth. This is Mongolian, like, Japanese. This is literally Anansi, like, this deck goes through and covers so many. This is from, I don't remember who this is, but this is like from an Indian, I don't remember if it's specifically Hindi or some other myth, so whoops. And this is like indigenous, you know. So this deck really tries to encompass so much. So it is very diverse. I think it's enriching. There's a lot of things in this deck that I didn't know. Oh, you see, we even have Egyptian. There were a lot of things in this that I did know just because I am someone who loves stories and so therefore knew a lot of fairy tales. But there were quite a few in here that I didn't know even. And so it was very educational also, especially, oh, and see, Mary Magdalene, or no, Our Lady of Guadalupe, sorry. This can be very educational, especially if you're like me. Oh, I can't even fit it all in frame. There we go. If you're like me and you get Beneath the Moon, this book, it's not like the most detailed. I do agree, because someone has said that before. It's not as detailed as it could be. But it does at least give you a quick one-pager story related to all the cards. And so for that, you know, this is like more than many would have done. And so for this, I appreciate. I do urge you, if you do get this deck and you are really interested in learning deeper about the stories, is obviously look up the full thing. But even having the guide, the extra folktale guidebook is so educational and just really opens you up to tales from around the world. And so for that reason, you know, this is, for me, one of my most diverse and educational and just enriching decks. Like, I feel like I can draw from so much more when I do tarot. Not only when I use this deck, but when I think about it in terms of relating the cards to other people, even when I'm not using this deck, you know? So for that reason, this for sure is my Culture Vulture, and I don't know, I love this deck. I need to start using it more. I just haven't been, I've been getting some new ones. I'm not called, but this is good. So good. Let's now talk about this deck. Okay. Number 11 of the Wanderlust decks tag is the Volunteer, a deck that's compassionate, helpful, and altruistic. And if you own this deck, you know what I'm talking about. This is Dirt Gems. This is a plant oracle deck, and it also comes with, by the way, one of the most detailed and amazing oracle guidebooks I just own. I'm just going to be straight up honest. Own. It's by Anne Louise Burdett and Chelsea Granger. This deck, I've also heard a rumor that it will go mass market soon, but I don't, or maybe not soon, but it's going to go. I don't know who, though, will be publishing it, but I have the indie version, and this guidebook is fantastic, so could not recommend this enough. I also had, I don't know, I got it dented, which is the saddest life, the box, but that's okay. The most important thing is the cards. This deck is everything I think of when it comes to someone who is a volunteer, who goes out of their way to travel and specifically with the intensive purposes of doing volunteer work and other beautiful things like that. Everything about this deck is about trying to help you feel better. It is a deck that is, you could also say this deck is very spiritual and guiding, and it just wants to make sure you're safe and well. And the reason why I say that is because of the guidebook that I showed. Every card in that guidebook gets a whole one-pager. And in that one-pager for each card, it goes in depth into what the plant is, like how it would have been used in ancient, more kind of like ancient times or like older day times, and what this plant energy is all about encompassing for you and to help you. A lot of this deck also deals with like overcoming trauma and overcoming just, you know, the roughness of life. Like, life can be hard to experience, but this deck is here to help you go through it, you know, and give you tools in your toolbox to help you be better. And that's literally what a volunteer kind of is. They dedicate their time and their energy to making sure that you're safe and you're well. And this deck is just so beautiful. I don't know. I don't get very, I never knew much about plants. I knew some things, like some plants I recognized even, but there was so much about this deck that I just didn't, or the plants they talked about that I just didn't know before, but now just feels so precious and familiar. But it really, I don't know, this deck just really cares. It really cares about you and everything, even before it's ever met you. And so for that reason, this to me is the volunteer. It's so compassionate, so caring, even in the way that like things are phrased in the guidebook, because it's phrased in a way that's not even, by the way, very gender specific. It could literally, anybody could literally get this deck and use it. It's not saying she or he, it's saying like a person or feeling or place, you know, it's not like tied to any one thing. And for that reason, I don't know, I love this deck. It took so much time to care and to be helpful and to try to make you feel accomplished, you know, in that way, or to make you feel better and calm. It's very good. I also have issues with anxiety, so I felt like using this deck kind of helped assuage some of that, like just take that away, you know, take the anxiety away. So could not recommend that enough, and that is my volunteer deck. But next up is my solo traveler, the solo traveler. This is a deck that is introspective, self-reliant, and empowering. And I mean, there's a few decks in my collection I probably could have picked over this one. But because I know this deck so well, because this deck has helped me so profoundly in my own tarot journey, and in that way being empowering because it has done that for me, my solo traveler is the Raven's Prophecy Tarot. Let me try to explain, though, why I also think, you know, why I think that way. For instance, by the way, I have edged mine in orange. You can even tell, though, even with edging, this deck has been beat to shit. This is my oldest tarot deck, and I'm pretty sure I have a printing of this deck, too, by the way, where the cardstock is not... I mean, some of it's been worn by time, but I'm pretty sure I have a copy of this deck where the cardstock is not as glossy. It is pretty thin for Llewellyn. I'm just noting that because every time I've seen people with this deck now, it's like very glossy and more so comparison than this one. And I don't know why the hell that is. Anyways, not important. The cards are important. This is my solo traveler because there's something about this deck. Maybe it's because it was my first tarot deck and all the problems it had to help me solve in the beginning, because I used a lot of... What's interesting now to look back on is when I first started tarot, I was using the cards for things that others would now call quote, quote, shadow work, you know? I was using it to give me some really heavy, like, questions and answers about things that were going on in my life, especially at a time when I'll admit, a time where I was really fucking depressed, and I was using this deck to kind of help me navigate things. And at the same time, the reason why I think this deck is... It is very good for introspection. When you're trying to figure things out about yourself and the world and life is hard and you just need something that'll help you get to that space of being able to figure it out, I think this deck can do a great job of that. It also can be very empowering. It can tell you how to get out of these situations, and it does it in a way that gently but firmly pushes you forward, telling you, you got this, you can do this. You can avoid the stickier situations, but it will take the work. Put in that work because it's worth it, you know. This deck is for that. But the reason why I would also say this deck can sometimes be very self-reliant is because this deck's guidebook is a great tarot resource, I think, for people. Maggie Stiefvater, if you don't know, is also the author of the Raven Cycle YA book series. I don't own those. This is the most hilarious part. I don't own those books anymore, but I did at one point, and I did read them, and that's also why I knew when this deck first came out to pick it up. I'm pretty sure I even pre-ordered this deck, so that tells you I have like I'm pretty sure I have like a first printing of this. But anyways, this deck is self-reliant because of that guidebook too. It helped me. Like, you don't need, in my opinion, the way that Maggie wrote the guidebook is you don't really need another deck to learn the tarot meanings in some ways. It can be self-reliant in in that way. It is more it follows like RWS tradition, but I don't know. The way that she writes things, it makes it so clear cut that even though the images itself, I'm going to say this now, the images itself were not great, probably great to learn for your first ever like tarot deck. But because of it, I now know the cards very profoundly, especially the quartz. She talks in great depth about like the personalities of the quartz. And it's from that, as someone who is also a writer, right? She writes them in such a way that it was very easy for me to understand the figures talked about. So it is, in that way, it's very self-reliant. And it just will tell you what it needs to tell you. It will empower you, and it is introspective. So if you don't own this deck and you don't mind the artwork and the black space and the more minimal feel of it, I have to say, like, this could be for you. It is such a great deck. I don't know what I would do if I lost this one. This one is just so important. So for me, this is my solo traveler. It is introspective, it is empowering, and it can be self-reliant, and it will help you at the same time. So I appreciate this one. Finally, my last deck in this tag, kind of on the nose, but let's talk about it. The last tag for the Wanderlust decks is 13, the Dreamer, a deck that's imaginative, creative, and visionary. The visionary moment, the visionary bit on this one kind of gave me pause because there's a couple of other decks I considered for this. Specifically, I also considered the Citadel Oracle, but instead I went more on the nose. The Dream Symbol Oracle deck by Copper Rabbit Illustrations. This is literally about dreams, about being dreamy. And in that way, I think it's also very imaginative because you could use this deck for dream work. And let me be honest, I mainly use this deck for dream work. You can use it like an actual oracle too, but I usually just use this deck to help me out with actual dream work. Like, because the way that this deck works is that each of the cards on it is related to common imagery found in dreams. I don't know how the creator figured out like what the big main ones were, but she used, I'm pretty sure there's, what is it, 50? Does it say on here? Yes, 50. There's 50 cards in this deck. Doesn't seem like it because it is very, the cardstock is so good, but it has like this, I don't know, there's something about this cardstock I really like, but it's very thin. So it's like, and it holds its shape well at the same time. So this deck takes common imagery found in dreams and relates them, right? Gives this little pamphlet gives meanings to, they're not short, they're not like detailed. I mean, they are short, they're not like completely detailed, but it is common imagery from dreams. And I just think it can be creative and imaginative because it takes those like main themes that can be found in dreams and like makes it so easy for you to understand, you know? It's creative in that it is taking that dream symbols and like actually putting them on the cards, and it can be visionary because it can really help you understand. For me personally, it's really helped me understand my dreams. So the way that I use it, because I mean, I am eventually needing to do like a whole walkthrough of this deck, like to understand. Ugh, this card always creeps me out. Anyways, I've been meaning to do a full walkthrough of this deck, but the way that I use it, just briefly to explain how creative it can be, is that, say I have a dream, I wake up. Usually, at least within the first couple of hours after having a weird-ass dream, I will remember what it's about. So how I've been using this deck is I will, you could use this like a regular oracle again, but the way I do is I go through the deck and say, I pick out the things that were very common in the dream. I'll just lay them all out, whatever imagery actually popped up in my dream. I'll lay them all out, and then I'll go through the book and try to weave together, not book, but this. I go through the images talked about in this and try to weave together what my dream could have been hinting at. Especially if there is any overlapping and common themes, I use that too. So it's very imaginative in that way. But it also gives you spreads if you want to use it like an actual oracle deck. It gives you the tools to do that. But for me, because it's very specifically a dream deck, I use it more in that way. But it is very creative and it is dreamy because it's literally dealing with dreams. So this is a deck that, I mean, the box it's a 2-piece box, and it's kind of easy to slip in and out of, though. So I don't know how easy it would be to actually travel with. But I could see this being useful to have even when you travel, you know. So in that way, it's just, I don't know. And the way that the images are displayed, it does give me this like dreamy quality of going out into world and being expanded into it, this kind of dreamscape place. So it's very transportive in that way. But yeah, this is my dreamer, and I just really enjoy this one. I don't know how else to explain it, but anyways, wow, this video ended up being really long. I'm just like looking at the time for me, but if you watch this long, thank you so much for watching. Seriously, like every time people comment and say just any nice thing, I'm always blown away and surprised. So if you've watched this long, thank you again, and I will hopefully see you next time. But for now, I'm going to go. So bye.